Kira Yoshikage. Kira Yoshikage isn't your typical anime villain. No world domination, no revenge plots. Just a regular office worker with an unhealthy obsession with severed hands. In JoJo's bizarre adventure, Kira is the kind of guy who wants a quiet life. Except his version of peace involves murdering women and keeping their hands as his girlfriends. And speaking of hands, use it to hit that subscribe button before he decides to add yours to his collection. Unlike most serial killers, Kira is a master of blending in. He's polite, soft-spoken, and disturbingly normal, which makes him even scarier. He doesn't kill for anger or pleasure. He does it because he just likes it. And thanks to his stand to Killer Queen, he leaves zero evidence behind, because he can erase people from existence. One time, he murdered a man, stole his face, and moved in with his victim's wife and son. She had no clue she was sleeping next to a serial killer. And if that's not bad enough, he also had a sentient mini-bomb that looked like a gremlin version of himself. Kira was unstoppable, until he monologued too long and got hit by an ambulance. If he had been just a little more careful, we'd all be living in his hand-holding nightmare. Anton Chigurh. If you think this guy looks familiar, it's not because he's the kid from Ned School's survival guide. No, you'll probably recognize him from No Country for Old Men, where he's a cold, relentless assassin hired to recover stolen drug money. However, he turns the job into his own personal philosophy experiment on fate and free will. Anton isn't just a hitman. He's the Grim Reaper in a bad haircut, flipping coins for people's souls. To Chigurh, life and death are as random as a Wi-Fi connection in a basement, and sometimes he lets fate decide by flipping a coin. Call it right, you live. Call it wrong, and, well, you won't even have time to process your mistake. That's where his signature weapon comes in. An air-powered bolt gun, normally used to slaughter cattle. He carries it around like it's just another tool in his arsenal, using it to silently execute people and blast open locked doors, like he's breaking into a Black Friday sale. Even when he should die, fate won't let him. After surviving a brutal car crash, this psychotic villain calmly bribes a teenager for his shirt, resets his dislocated arm, and walks off into the sunset. No emotion, no hesitation. Anton Chigurh played God with a coin toss. But the next villain, she didn't leave fate to chance. She made torture her legacy. And the worst part, she wasn't fictional. Madame Lalaurie. Most villains are fictional. Madame Delphine Lalaurie? Unfortunately, real. An American Horror Story, Coven. She's a fictionalized version of an actual 1800s socialite, whose idea of home decor included a secret torture chamber, fueled by deep insecurities and rage over her husband's affairs, especially with enslaved women. Lalaurie's cruelty escalated into a full-blown obsession with nice beauty treatments. Her most horrifying experiment? A beauty ball made from fresh human pancreases, harvested straight from her victims. Looking at her portrait, though, let's just say the results weren't exactly glowing. Here's a brief list of her absolute worst crimes. Sewing mouths shut. Victims were kept alive but completely silent, suffering in agony, breaking bones and resetting them incorrectly, just to see what would happen. Removing intestines and wrapping them around people's waists, like a grotesque living belt. Smearing herself in her slave's blood in a superstitious attempt to maintain her youth, murdering the baby her husband had, with a female slave, and using the baby's blood as makeup. Her reign of terror only ended because of a kitchen fire that exposed her torture chamber. The people of New Orleans rioted, but Lalaurie escaped before she could face justice. Joe Goldberg. And I already hear you, Joe who? Joe Mama. Oh wait, no, just Joe Goldberg, which is somehow worse. Joe Goldberg is what happens when a rom-com nice guy thinks he's the hero, but he's actually one restraining order away from a Netflix true crime doc. In You, Joe isn't your typical stalker. He romanticizes his obsession like he's writing the world's creepiest love poem. Joe rationalizes every murder like he's pitching a self-help book. I didn't kill them because I'm a psychopath. I killed them because I love you. If you ever hear that line in real life, run. Joe's favorite method? The glass cage. If you wake up in it, congrats. You're now an unwilling guest in Joe's twisted fantasy. From ex-boyfriends to nosy neighbors, anyone who threatens his romance gets locked up, or worse. He covers his tracks like a pro, but his impulses always ruin everything. When things go sideways, new identity, new city, new true love to stalk. Joe Goldberg never stops. He could be in your bookstore right now, pretending to recommend Pride and Prejudice while planning your murder. But the next villain? He doesn't just control his victims, he redesigns them. Get ready for one of the most disturbing experiments in horror history, Dr. Heiter. In the Human Centipede, this former world-renowned surgeon decided that life-saving operations were overrated and instead devoted himself to creating the most disturbing DIY project ever conceived. He wasn't trying to cure disease or push medical boundaries. He just wanted to see if he could turn people into a single digestive worm. The result? A human centipede. 3 people surgically attached mouth to, well, you get the idea. The horror wasn't just the surgery itself, it was the psychological torment. The victims were still fully conscious, trapped in an existence worse than death, and forced to experience the absolute worst team-building exercise in history. And as for the digestive process, let's just say being at the front of the centipede was the only small mercy in this nightmare. Heiter didn't just perform this experiment. He relished it. Watching his victims struggle wasn't a flaw in his design. It was the entire point. No army, no powers, just a scalpel, an obsession, and a complete lack of anything resembling human decency. And somehow, this movie got sequels. Green Goblin. Norman Osborn was a brilliant scientist. Then he sniffed one too many chemicals, and suddenly he was wearing a goblin-themed flight suit, throwing pumpkin bombs, and cackling like a Disney villain on steroids. Unlike most villains, Goblin isn't just one person. He's two personalities fighting over the same brain. One moment, he's a loving father. The next, he's flying through New York on a hoverboard, terrorizing Spider-Man just for fun. His greatest obsession? Destroying Peter Parker. He doesn't just try to kill him. He emotionally and psychologically torments him like it's his full-time job. He first manipulates Peter by pretending to be his mentor and father figure, making him feel like he finally has someone who understands him, only to then turn around and try to kill him. When that doesn't work, Green Goblin goes straight for emotional trauma, dropping Peter's girlfriend off a bridge just to see if Peter can catch her in time. Spoiler, he didn't. Years later, he does it again. Murdering Aunt May in No Way Home and laughing as Peter holds her dying body. He even ruins his own son's life, driving Harry Osborn into madness and turning him into another Goblin-themed disaster. If Spider-Man ever writes a PTSD memoir, Green Goblin gets his own chapter. However, the next villain makes the Green Goblin look tame. Ramsey Bolton. Ramsey Bolton is what happens when medieval torture gets a personality and a reality show. In Game of Thrones, he doesn't kill for power or strategy. He kills because it's fun. He treats torture like a form of art. And the worst part? He's really good at it. Born a bastard, Ramsey had one goal: prove he was more ruthless than anyone, even his noble father. And he succeeded. He didn't just kill his enemies. He broke them completely before finishing the job. Here's just a taste of his greatest hits. Flaying people alive, whether it was prisoners, traitors, or just because it was a slow Tuesday, Ramsey peeled people like oranges, hunting women for sport. He released them into the woods, gave them a head start, then chased them down with his hounds before feeding them to his dogs like medieval DoorDash. Theon Greyjoy's Reek makeover. He flayed Theon's fingers, beat him into submission, castrated him, and mentally rebooted him so hard he forgot his name, murdering his own family. He stabbed his father, fed his stepmother to his dogs, and let his newborn baby brother become puppy chow, all for a promotion. And through every horrific act, Ramsey smiled, even when he lost everything, got betrayed, and was ultimately served as dinner to his own starving dogs. He still had that smug, punchable grin. Rose Armitage. Rose Armitage is the ultimate trap. A smiling, loving girlfriend who lures her victims into a nightmare they never see coming. At first, Rose seems like the perfect girlfriend, funny, supportive, even woke enough to reassure Chris, her black boyfriend, that her parents would have voted for Obama a third time. She defends him from racist microaggressions, stands up for him, and makes him feel like he has nothing to worry about when meeting her wealthy white family. But that's the whole trick. She isn't his safe space. She's his bait. Her family doesn't just run a modern-day slave trade. They run the worst Craigslist human trafficking scheme in history. Wealthy white clients bid on black bodies like they're shopping for a used Lexus. And once the deal is sealed, they surgically replace the victim's brain with the buyer's, leaving the original person trapped in the sunken place, an eternal helpless backseat ride in their own body. By the time Chris realizes the truth, Rose is already scrolling for her next victim like it's Tinder. No guilt. No hesitation. Just cold, calculated evil, sipping a glass of milk like a full-blown psychopath. And not just any milk. She drinks it separately from her dry Fruit Loops, one piece at a time. Honestly, forget the brain swapping. She deserves jail time just for that. And that wraps up the most psychotic villains in fiction. But who do you think is the most twisted? Drop your thoughts in the comments unless you want Joe Goldberg to search your address next. And hey, subscribe now, because if you don't, I might just flip a coin on your fate, and you'd better hope Anton Chigurh isn't watching.